just give you a little introduction to the topic for this week, which is the first period of European exploration. The title of the chapter in your textbook is Colliding Worlds, and it just deals with the era in the early modern, late medieval period when Europeans began discovered the Americas and then began to explore it and then eventually conquer it and colonize it. And so basically, you're going to have a few big points to go through in the textbook and in the readings. You'll get a look at the civilizations of the ancient Americas, which were very complex and sophisticated, actually, especially in South America. In Central America and Mexico, you have several civilizations. Maya and Aztec, especially, are very large, wealthy civilizations. The Incan civilization in South America, modern-day Peru, as well. And even in North America, the civilization associated with Cahokia in modern-day Missouri, near St. Louis, also had a civilization that had cities in it, but it died out long before European colonists actually got there. So you get some background on that. You'll also get background on what European civilization, Western Europe, was like around or about 1500, when they're about to start colonizing large parts of the world. And you're going to find that there's actually a lot of similarity between the civilizations of ancient Americas and Europe at that time, both very hierarchical, both very traditional in many respects. And yet at the same time, Europe begins to expand and become a much different sort of civilization at the very same time. And it's your exploration and colonization of other parts of the globe are part of that. And of course, you also, along with that exploration, you have Europeans, beginning to explore not just the Americas, which they discovered, but also Africa. It's in the 1440s that the Portuguese especially begin to explore Africa, begin to tap into the African slave trade. Slavery was already well established in Africa, and they had large trade with the Muslim world, the Middle East as well. And the Europeans begin to go looking for ways to tap into that. The Portuguese are the first. And so you have the involvement of civilizations from 4 different continents, basically, present at the birth of the United States in the long run. Africans, of course, will be transported to the New World as slaves, but also, of course, the native populations, and then, of course, lastly, actually, European settlers. And so you'll have the Great Conquest, and I get that in the first chapter, the second chapter later on, of the Incan and the Aztec civilizations of Mexico by the Spanish, with a great power, Catholic power, in Western Europe at that time. And the last thing to mention in the first part of this week, this topic, is the rise of England as a colonial power. They're actually latecomers, and they get into the sort of colonial game of Western European powers, part to oppose the Spanish, who are Catholic. England is Protestant. You'll learn about the Reformation in this chapter. That's about all preview for this week. And as far as the readings in the textbook, you'll get the main story from that. You'll also get to look at sources, primary sources taken from the native peoples of the Americas, but also from those European explorers and colonists who first have contact in North America and South America with those native civilizations, as well as an essay by Neil Salisbury, which deals with the impact of Europeans on civilizations of North and South America, and sort of puts it in a context that as dramatic as that confrontation was, you have this, it's called Colliding Worlds for a reason, the first chapter is, that it was actually not quite as dramatic as maybe sometimes think, that there were already a long history before Europeans got there, which they became a part of. And so one of the things you want to think about when you're reading the sources for this week, if you're taking a look at the midterm essay, which you already should have done, is that that first essay question is going to be about, okay, what long-term development shaped American national identity by the early 1800s? Because when we get to the midterm, we'll have gotten there in the course. How does a modern democratic nation emerge out of all these ancient civilizations, very old, very traditional, very sophisticated in their own right? How do they sort of clash together and come together and form eventually what we think of as being America, basically? So it's something to look at when you read those sources for this week. And One last thing before I sign off, do take a look when you go through the sources. The syllabus, I've made some corrections to it. I didn't mention about how each assignment is going to be graded, so I put that in more detail. Changed that already for the overview. But that's a little preview for this week. Hope you good luck. Hope you have a good time doing this, and please contact me if you have any questions. Thanks.